person. So I will go in a very much human side of the whole story. Yeah. So, and maybe a little bit provocative, but I hope this will be for the good.
Great.
This is why you are here, Violeta.
Here. See, Karin, eventually we did it together.
Yeah.
You know, we were planning, but here you go.
Yeah.
You know?
Good morning, Francesco.
Oh, hello, good morning. I just joined in.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good to having you. We are all online now. Here's Violeta, Karin. I think you have met both. You will remember Karin from the autumn, from the December conference.
I do remember indeed. Yes.
I do too, Francesco.
Sorry, I had to get my cats out.
Yeah, me too. Already locked them out.
And there's Slaven. You also remember Slaven Michkovic, right?
For sure, yes.
Yeah,
And,
hello.
Hello.
There is Sebastian, who is going to be the operative host, and today my other colleague from the CBA team. This is the team that is online right now. We have tried your slides, so everything works very well. We will have a short introduction. And I will introduce all of you to the participants who are going to start coming in right now. And then you will be the first speaker, Francesco. After that,
okay.
After the no, sorry, the Violeta goes first, and then there's you. Violeta makes the introduction, then there's you. Each of you, it's recommended to have 12 to 15 minutes. You will do a big favor to me if if you're roughly on time. I don't have the habit to interrupt you, because I think it's much more precious that you keep your thread. But it's also important not to derail from the timing. After you, there will be question time. So I expect there will be some questions. If there is no question, then I will ask a question. Each of you as speakers can of course contribute with questions. Then after that, there's who is first? I think Slaven, right?
Yep.
Slaven, and then Karin concludes. And there's question time again. After that, we will have some instructions for the second part of the seminar, which starts only at 15:30. The whole timing is supposed to be limited to 90 minutes right now. Okay, do you think we are? Yeah, please.
Yeah, just quickly a question. Am I the first one and the only one not on Zoom?
Yes, unfortunately, yes.
Okay, no problem. And also, how many people signed up for this event? I mean, aside from us, speakers and so on.
There are close to 50 participants registered. It's quite a mixed group, very international, I would say. Also, in a good part, thanks to all of you who worked on LinkedIn extensively. And so we've got some, French people, Austrians.
Greece just logged in.
Yes, Greece, some Slovenians. I think there are some people from India. There's, I think, somebody with from the World Bank. So there are people from the local Intesa San Paulo. So it's quite a variety. And I'm very pleased with this turnout. There are some researchers from institutes, people from innovation promotion agencies. For example, somebody from Torino. I remember when I from before. So I think quite a very high quality group of people who are engaged with circularity, with business model transformation. And I think it can really be a good audience.
Excellent. Thanks, Yuri.
Yeah. Okay. Sebastian, how are we doing you should let us know when people are
we already have 21 people joined, but they're all named Massimo because we didn't have the automated system set up yet. So I would like to.
But I think they can do it themselves.
If they can press on their own name, on
Yeah.
their own icon, and choose more and rename.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry for the inconvenience.
That's totally okay.
If you can.
Very funny to have everyone named Massimo.
Yeah. The cloning is real.
Yeah, it works.
So do we hear each other? Is everybody, can everybody hear?
Yes, actually,
Yes,
you
perfectly.
are a
Loud
little
and clear.
bit low. Your voice, Yuri, is a little bit low. I can hear everyone else better than you.
Mm-hmm. Is this better now?
Better, much better.
Okay, it's because, yeah, it's a little low. Okay. Very well. I think we can, Sebastian, do all of us, all participants hear each other now?
I can hear you well.
Yeah, so, I mean, also others.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so I think we can
Yes,
slowly start while other people are.
Yeah, and people should be demuted, right? They should be muted when they listen and only demute when they talk, right?
Exactly. Yes.
Okay.
So if you allow me, I will take over the screen. Good morning, everybody. I hope you can hear me well. We will start in a minute. We would just like to have really everybody on board, and we are pleased with a very high turnout. So this means inevitably that we should wait a minute more so that everybody can join in. I think we can start if you agree. Good morning again. My name is Yuri Giacomelli. I'm going to be the moderator of this webinar today, and I'm very pleased to welcome you all at the financing of the circular business through the pandemic, our CBA webinar, which is going to be held in two parts today. And in the next minutes, I will introduce how the program will run. Our seminar today is organized by the Circular Business Academy in cooperation with the Public Fund for Human Resources Development of the Republic of Slovenia, whom we generously thank and share their welcome address. Of course, this is the seminar is free of charge and is co-financed by the European Social Fund and the Slovenian Ministry of Labor, Family, Social Affairs and Equal Opportunities. We thank you in advance for sharing feedback at the end of this seminar, because this will help us improve our work and provide even better quality in the future. Let me spend just a couple of words on the Circular Business Academy. It is a dedicated knowledge platform enabling managers and entrepreneurs, experts, investors, policymakers to embrace circular business model innovation by creating and exchanging and sharing specific competence, and try on the civilizational paradigm shift. We consider the eco-civilization as the final destination of this complex, engaging process of which we are all a part. And we believe that today's turnout, which is close to 50 engaged participants, is a good demonstration of how high on a priority list this is for many, many of us. Why the Circular Business Academy? Above all, we focus on business models. We focus on business models transformations. We try to help business people do good business by thriving on this complex transformation. We approach them in many ways, particularly to three types of formats. One is, of course, a knowledge sharing platform. Such a webinar is one way of doing it. We do it with a high number of partnerships and supporters. The second approach is the incubation of sustainable innovation ecosystems at various levels, of course, from a company level to regional city levels, and with into knowledge sharing at the systemic level. The third aspect is financing facilitation. Actually, this seminar falls within the first format, but actually addresses issues related to financial facilitation quite significantly. Today, we are going to address some, I think, quite important questions that are in the time of a pandemic are addressed to many of us. Is the pandemic and the global economic downturn affecting circular frontrunners in a positive way? Is this a negative impact? Are we prepared? What will be the consequences? And more particularly, what is the role of banks in this period? How do private investors tackle such issues? And how actually we, as generally, as in our respective roles, can approach the challenges that we are faced with? How, more specifically, how can sustainable firms who are developing circular business models pursue their course in this uncertainty? We have some excellent speakers, and I'm going to present you all of them in a minute. Let me say that we are working in two parts today. There's about a 90-minute first part of the seminar with very interesting introductory speeches and instructions for the homework that you will be able to do in between the first and the second part during the lunch break. At 15:30 we are coming back. The homework will be to get to know the circularity assessment tool, which we call CAS. Some of you have actually already compiled a questionnaire that is freely accessible on our website, and I will deliver further instructions to that in a minute. Here are the speakers of the today's seminar. I'm very pleased to introduce Mrs. Violeta Bulc, who we know as entrepreneur, manager, advisor, lecturer, author, and the wider international public knows Violeta as the European Commissioner for Transport in the last term of the European Commission. Our second speaker today is Francesco Ferrero, the head of European Investment Bank Group office in Ljubljana, Slovenia. Third, Slaven Mičković, experienced the risk manager and researcher in Abanca, and Karin Huber-Heim, the academic program director at the University of Applied Sciences in Vienna, specialized in sustainability and responsibility management. Luigi Amati, the president of Business Angels Europe, and Peter Groznik are going to join us in the second half of the seminar. Just quickly, let me go through the house rules. Please, the most important rule is, of course, please be active, please participate. You can do this by using the chat box all the time. We will try to answer all your questions. You can help each other by answering them, not just by addressing them. Secondly, there will be time available for discussion, for your questions, and we will try to answer them right away. Also, of course, when you don't speak, it's advisable to mute your microphone so that no disturbing voices would come in between. Then, of course, you will be invited to compile the QCAS questionnaire. Here is the link where you can find it. And again, you will get these further instructions later on. Don't forget to provide us feedback after that, and stay tuned. This webinar is recorded. All the materials will be available from the website. So all the presentations will be delivered to you just after the seminar, freely from the website of the Circular Business Academy. And here, of course, is our first speaker, the introductory speaker this morning, Violeta Bulc, who is addressing questions related to resilience and sustainable development in times of the pandemic. May I hand you over the word, Violeta, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Yuri, and good morning to everyone who is all over the world on the other side of this frequency. It's always really, for me, I'm very curious. Who are the faces? What is the energy on the other side that joined the session? But considering the topic, I know that you are those who will make a change. So I hope you will be provocative enough with your questions that we can calibrate our joint actions, and from this seminar on, be even more coordinated in our attempts to follow the inner call for sustainable planet, for sustainable life, and as Yuri mentioned, as a long-term vision, a new eco-civilization. I know sometimes this word civilization is too big, but you know, in the last 40,000 years, many of them happened. Many new civilizations emerged, and there is no reason why we wouldn't be at the beginning of the new one today. And I feel that that is in the air. So let's hope we'll have a bit more insights at the end of this day into why do we believe that that is something emerging in the horizon. But before I go straight into my presentation, I would like to raise one statement and ask you to pause for a second and go deep into your heart and think about it. I believe that the change that we are discussing today has nothing to do with money. It has to do with our awareness and simply our decision that we're going to do things differently from this point on. And you don't need money for that. After that, money will follow the projects that will emerge out of this frequency. So now I'm inviting you to pause for a second and think about it. What do you feel inside, in your chest? Are you with me? Well, you can chat, you can share your comments in the chat room, but I will continue with the content infused by the energy that we just created. I can feel it. I'm very excited here inside. So with that, I'd like to also switch to a few of the pictures that I prepared for you. and go really straight into the discussion. What's happening now? Has the pandemic changed the conditions under which we can engage? And what could that potentially be? So first of all, I'd like to say that we have the same amount of money as we had a couple of weeks ago in circulation. I will be even more provocative and say maybe we even have it more than before. But let's leave the discussion for another day. So the question is now, can we develop predictability and trust with our projects and our behavior, that those that make decisions where the money goes will trust sustainable development models and strategies, and of course redirect the money in the projects that support that philosophy. How do you feel about that? These are fundamental questions, at least for me, and I'm inviting you to consider them. So how do you behave when introducing sustainable projects? How do you behave, and how do you present them? With the confidence or with the fear? Or with the people behind you, customers, and clear customers' needs that we are addressing? Or are we still a bit shy, not really sure that that's the way we should proceed? I'm fully on the side of eco-civilization, sustainable development, and circular economy. That doesn't mean it's easy. It's not easy. And many times, personally, I'm challenged whenever I need to make personal decisions to walk this path. But I know that with every step where there are more and more people around me, my decisions and my personal choices are more confident and more sustainable, and the change is happening. But of course, it's good to know that the same kind of steps are being made on a system level. And I'm sure that my colleague from EIB will go more into details, but I would like to share with you this slide that shows how much EU is already committing as on the investment side to the Sustainable European Investment Plan, and also that this did not happen overnight, but it's been a long period that EU has been paving the way to get here. So I can confidently say that under the previous Commission, we all had to readjust our portfolios to the sustainable development strategies, and of course engage with the financial institutions to reshape the way how we prioritize projects and give priorities to those that had a sustainable value. That's why, of course, part of the FC investment program was also the focus on, which is also called Juncker's plan, was also focused on sustainability. Only in transport, 60% of all investments were made towards the sustainable development already in the previous 5 years. And if I share with you that we invested 270 billion euros in 5 years' time, I mean, this is quite a substantial amount of money that has been already steered in this direction. So that brings more confidence, that brings more clarity and more predictability. Yes, my answer is yes. We will see more investments in this sector, and it's up to us to make sure that our projects that we present are mature and they have a very clear business plan that, as I said, ensures the predictability and stability in a sense of investment recovery. So banks do play a role, but not the only ones. I mean, I pay a lot of attention, and I used to pay a lot of attention while in my previous job, also to the institutional investors, being insurance funds or pension funds or just investment banks, not only EU investment bank, where I have to say that European Investment Bank has been really responsive. And just few weeks before the pandemic, they even declared to be the first green bank in the world, dedicating very strongly their future strategic development to this subject, transforming over the next 10, 20 years into a completely green bank. That was a very strong message, and I haven't heard them denying it yet. There might be a year or two of a slowdown, but just because the whole economy might slow down, even though here the investors will play the major role, because investors are the ones who push the economy further, and investments in, for example, green infrastructure that has a low but stable gains over the next 20, 30 years is certainly the green economy where financial institutions can play an extremely important role, especially pension funds and that I mentioned before, and the insurance funds. The green infrastructure for them is really attractive, being in transport, digital, or energy. Private investors will play an important role too, especially in the startup business. And I'm presenting you here a couple of models that show which are the areas where these startups can find its place. And European Commission, European Parliament are jointly, yearly pushing for green startup community to be in touch, to be active, to promote itself. It's every year we see broader scope of startup companies and SMEs who come on board, presenting their bright new ideas. And I will never forget the message that they gave us at one of the sessions that I moderated with them. They said, please don't think that we only need money. Primarily, we need data. So this is something to consider. Because it's true, for new business models to emerge, you need to have access to big data in order to be innovative and look for completely new horizontal solutions, businesses, services, where of course all of us will have to play an important role and stay open, make sure the data stay open, and that startups and SMEs have access to it. So without going into real details in these models, but you could see that, for example, only in the sustainable mobility, you have at least 5 major areas where sustainable development can play, models can play extremely important role, being green vehicles, renewable fuels and energies, green infrastructure for sustainable mobility solutions, smart mobility. Here we see that digital and transport and energy jointly play probably a front runner's role. And I'm glad that European Commission decided already under the previous mandate, and that state in the plan, that they will specially stimulate the projects where all 3 portfolios join forces and submit the multi-portfolio projects that bring all this together and make, of course, a platform then for completely new business models. So I'm very much inviting you to take a closer look at that, especially those that are in the financial community, and look for projects like that, because they will really help to reshape the society. There's going to be a huge change also in the field of smart mobility, where especially with connected, cooperative, and autonomous mobility, where the green component is one of the key drivers and justifications for the investments in this area. And of course, mass mobility as a service, which was promoted which we started to promote a couple of years ago, and it became the major stream now, also revenue stream in the field of mobility. But without doing any injustice to other portfolios, I just want to stimulate you with the concrete examples, because you can find similar things in other portfolios as well. Everybody was active, and we are really aware that for European Union, green agenda and green technologies, green innovation, green business models are not only the necessity for survival, but they are excellent business opportunities to stay one of the strongest global players. Let's not forget that European Union is the second by GDP global player, but I'm quite convinced that we are the most stable one, in a sense of being clear on priorities that we want to take on board and follow in order to achieve also results. Of course, pandemia challenged everything because it disrupted the existing economical foundation. Well, you know, this is nothing new. If we think that this is the last challenge that we are facing in our lifetime, well, let's become real. There's going to be many of them of similar or even larger magnitude. So for me, any kind of challenge of this kind is an opportunity to really develop the capacity within myself, within the community that I work, or on a global scale, that no matter what comes, we are able to handle it. So this capacity to handle the crisis is something I think we need to get used to it. Also, I'd like to share with you a thought that this is, the climate change is nothing new to the planet Earth. If you take a look at the last 25 million years, you would see there's been enormous changes happening all over the planet in a certain periods, but these periods were in millions of years. What human contribution to climate change is that because of our behavior, we speed up the changes so fast that we cannot even handle them anymore. So that they are happening in one lifetime, and nobody with the body that we have can readjust that fast. So what we are called to do is to slow down our impact and follow the natural cycles, and then be able to readjust as humans and give ourselves a chance that we can continue to coexist on this planet Earth. And that's why we have to have a more systemic view over what we do. So it's sustainability. It's not just reuse, recycle, reduce, or repair, but is a fundamental shift in the mentality. That's why I'm saying we have to make the shift in our awareness first, and that doesn't cost any money. But it requires a lot of inner strength in each individual to be willing to make a change. And then we need to make sure, and I'm inviting all investors especially, and project promoters, that they, by definition, as the prerequisite, add green criteria to everything that you do. You know, that doesn't cost any money either. So as soon as you put the green components in the criteria of everything that you finance, wow, you've done an enormous change, and the rest will follow step by step. So here I'm really offering is that along with the green awareness, we need green strategies, green criteria, green funding, and then this will be able to create a foundation that we can move towards eco-civilization, which primary goal of this eco-civilization is really that the Earth becomes an ecozone of the universe. And then when we populate other planets, which now is the big buzz in the business community, let's do it with the sustainable criteria. Unfortunately, today, they don't exist. If anybody saw the latest NASA NASA call for proposals and the 3 awards that they gave for landing to the moon, they drop all the garbage in the space, they drop the garbage on the moon, and there is no requirements in the call for proposals that whoever drops the parts of the rockets, that they need to collect them. Nobody is called to add to the satellites that they launch in the orbit, that there has to be a mechanism to bring them down. Yeah, so today, not only that we are taking this unfair approach and the polluting mentality around the world, we're taking it to the space. So now it's time in the early stages that we say no. And who has the key? Investors, because follow the money, follow the power. So please, whoever is here listening, wake up in your heart, in your awareness, the part that says, I can do it. I can just put one line in the call for proposals, one line in the contract that I'm making with my client that says that the project has to be green. It has to take care of also elements of circular economy. And we will be, instead of in the course, let's say to the right, we will be in the course to the left. And in 30 years' time, we'll say, yes, we made the right decision. So at the end, it's 16 minutes and 24 seconds that I've used. I'm just sharing a picture, which if it attracts your attention, you can find it all over the social media and many webinars that will also follow together with Yuri and his team in the weeks to come, that we can explore further how can we help each other to really build strong structures within which people will be even more confident to take the steps towards circular economy.
Thank you very much,
Thank
Violeta.
you very much.
In the question time, I will ask you to share the slide representing the eco-civilization. So please prepare it, okay? And the entire presentation of Violeta's is going to be available to all of you. Next week, we start the debate. Actually, it's going to be a joint exercise of how to imagine our final destination. We talk a lot about changing, which sometimes feels like, you know, a trouble. We don't talk about the journey enough in terms of of this destination that we all desire, even though we do have this in our heads. So the term eco-civilization stands for the attempt of how to imagine this, because then, of course, design can happen. And Violeta is a promoter of this concept, so that's why I would like to shortly come back to that. I really, I think you made actually a very good disposition to Francesco Ferrero, who is coming next. On one hand, you said we are richer because we spend less during this unusual times. I would like to hear what bankers say about that. On the other hand, of course, Francesco represents the banking group, the Europe's market maker for the climate issues, and recently also for the issues related to fight the pandemic. I'm very pleased to having him here with us, and I would like to hand over to him. Francesco is with us on the telephone line. He will have a presentation which will be managed by the host, and he will address some of the issues related to how to handle the pandemic, what is the role of the banking system, and how to assure this green way out of the crisis that Violeta talked about. So please, Francesco Ferrero, the word is yours.
Thank you very much, Yuri. Good morning, everybody, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here. Unfortunately, only via phone, so even a bit more remote than most of you on Zoom. Therefore, that means I won't be able to see the comments on the chat on the side, but I'll be very happy to discuss and take questions after this. So I think there was a very good segue from Yuri into introducing who we are as European Investment Bank. Perhaps just a very brief introduction about the institution. It's also on the slide at page 2, which should be on your screen. So we are a policy bank. So a policy bank means that we are a public institution, so the Bank of the EU, not-for-profit institution that really, whose scope is to pursue policy goals of the European Union, but at the same time we are also a bank. So a AAA rated institution whose model is to collect money on the capital markets at very, very cheap rates and to turn them into long-term loans. Essentially, we have several more products, but essentially to invest into projects which are technically sound and financially strong. So this makes us quite unique. There are other similar institutions like the World Bank or EBRD, but in Europe we are by far the most important, also in terms of amounts, lenders, traditionally into infrastructure. Let's say what EIB was doing 50, 40, 30 years ago was mostly bread and butter infrastructure. Then we moved on more and more into support of SMEs, energy, and then today our new mission, which I would say it's already been the case for a number of years, is climate. Climate means adaptation and fight to climate change, as well as a number of environmental goals. So perhaps before moving on to this topic, I would like to make one thing clear. So as EIB, COVID-19, of course, is the emergency of the moment. We have been fairly active on a number of fronts and not related to the environment, strictly speaking, but just on fighting the current crisis. Because for countries, households, companies, of course, there is a matter of self-preservation in the very short term when there is such a new type of challenge that comes upon us. But of course, we are already thinking about what happens next and how to continue our work. Just perhaps for your information, EIB at the moment has already committed and is delivering around 40 billion of resources all over Europe to fight the pandemic crisis, so essentially support to SMEs and the healthcare sector. Also out of the EU, we are quite active together with the Commission, so we have just committed over 5 billion euros, out of which 1.7 strictly for the Western Balkans, only for emergency related to the COVID crisis. But again, aside from the short-term health emergency and the consequence of the pandemics, another thing I would like to make very clear is that the commitment to anything environment, climate change, and of course in this big basket there is also everything that relates to the circular economy. EIB is more committed than ever. So already well before the crisis struck, we made very ambitious and public statements. We set targets for ourselves. So this is actually slide number 3. So really to step up our commitments to fighting climate change. And not only to do it via our lending, but via our financing of projects directly, but really to become a model for the rest. So in 2 ways. First, sharing best practices and technical support and advisory, but also assisting the other institutions and private sector to do the same. What I mean here is really to use best practices to show that essentially it's possible and it's also economically convenient to come up with projects that make a lot of sense financially, and they follow the best practices from an environmental point of view. So this means that EIB will lend 50% of our annual amounts, so which is in the region of 60 to 70 billion euros every year for environmental and climate support goals. And we are going to be fully aligned by the end of this year on all the principles of the Paris Agreement. So this has got a lot of implications. Who's curious about what I mean in detail, of course, can go on our website. It's really a mine for information. So I would refer you to what we have there. Also, not to use up too much of my time talking about EIB in general. Perhaps moving on to slide number 4. I've just put here something actually coming from a conference that was arranged also by Yuri and the Circular Business Academy in Slovenia just a couple of months ago, seems ages ago before the lockdown struck. And I mean, I recognize some of the names of the speakers were already there. We went quite in depth into what it means from an economic point of view, what is the economic sense of projects in the circular economy. We gave quite a lot of examples on how those should be structured, what banks and financiers look in it, and we really went a little bit into the details. Today, perhaps I would like to remind, also talking as a banker with the other hat, not so much of let's say a policy person and a believer in all the good that should come from structuring projects and new investments properly from a circularity point of view, but also putting the hat of a banker. So essentially, we always ask ourselves the question, what are the risks? If also strictly from a financial point of view, if we invest in a certain project, be it investing via equity, be it investing in the form of lenders. So essentially, I believe that banks and financial supporters of any project typically have in mind the question, what can go wrong in this? And in a due diligence, you ask yourself a lot of systematic questions just to understand, to make sure that you understand the project, the various implications, and indeed what can go wrong in those. So perhaps moving on to slide number 5, here there are couple of things that perhaps you could find interesting, which is a number of typical features that we have seen after years of investing in circular economy projects. Again, I'm not going to present specific projects as we did in the last event in person that really had quite a wealth of case studies. Here the topic would be more about the impact of COVID-19, right? So here, just for, let's say for everybody to be clear about what we are talking about, in case maybe somebody is thinking, what are the features that a bank that looks both at the technical and organizational side of a project, as well as the financial risks of a project, what is this bank looking at? So typically here there are a few of the features that we look for and have identified in circular economy projects. So it's a bit wider than just recycling. So it's really about efficient and sustainable use of resources, making products in particular able to reuse, to be repaired, remanufactured, and so extended life cycle of such models, and also use different business models built around it, perhaps around sharing within quite a lot of business models that really aim at maximizing the usage of a certain asset. Finally, predictably, of course, the core of circular economy revolves around using less and better the resources that we have already, instead of getting more that should be then wasted fairly quickly. So perhaps in this sense, I would like to remind the role of policy, because of course here we are investors, activists, perhaps NGOs, but the reality is that all of this requires a number of subjects, a number of parts of our society to work in an aligned manner, and policy is really essential. So in that sense, I looked recently at the new action plan of the European Commission, which I encourage, which was published in March. So there was quite a lot of work coming to fruition in March, but of course, most of it came before the COVID crisis. And it's really, I was quite impressed myself by how wide-ranging this is. So over 2020 and 2021, there will be a number of regulation acts, directives, and so on, which are going to touch quite a number of different industries. So ranging from manufacturing, plastics, packaging, and so on. And it's really one of the things that I would also suggest everybody to keep in mind from the perspective of a banker, is that do not wait for regulation to come and tell you you have to produce packaging with this and that content maximum of non-recyclable material or toxic material. So be proactive, because that means that when the regulation comes, you'll be ready. You don't have to improvise. You don't have to be a taker of some decisions. You'll be ready to hit the ground running. And this is coming, and I think we're going to see an acceleration in everything which is related to circular economy just in a matter of 2 or 3 years. Moving on to, well, what is slide number 6 in my presentation, I would like to focus just briefly your attention on the fact that financing for any sort of financier, be it a bank, private equity, or any sort of private investor, from pension funds and insurance companies that typically have a very much detached approach. So they defer to fund managers and so on to do the real work, and they want to invest into something which is low risk enough. They have a mandate to make the most of the resources in a secure manner for, let's say, for the investors, if we're talking mutual funds, for pensioners, if we're talking pension funds, and so on. So there are considerations that really revolve around risk, which are essential for who puts the money into a project. And here, I would remind you that, in my view, for what we have seen as EIB, there isn't let's say, a one-size-fits-all approach for circular economy projects. We are really talking about projects that range from sort of startups that have brilliant projects, ideas, perhaps a pilot stage, and we're talking about very large established companies that have really the need of having a lot of resources to change their supply chains, to change their production facilities in a way which sometimes is having a huge impact. So all of this, excuse me, all of this is, I would say, an ecosystem of, let's say, a range of companies from small to large side business models that rely on more established business models, and they will just change, tweak some parts of the production process to entirely new ones, which are perhaps not tested and therefore quite risky for a bank to support, new technologies that perhaps need to have a lot of other considerations in terms of take-up, patenting, acceptance by the wider markets, and so on, as well as, let's say, more perhaps contractual issues that often we see in circular economy projects. By this, I mean the fact that the production of specific feedstock, perhaps to a certain quality factor, be it recycled materials that in the past especially were marked by the problem of not being comparable, let's say some metals or alloys and so on, could not be produced with the same quality standards that were required by industry to use in their own production. I think more and more we are coming to technical solutions in more of those in these sectors, but these are definitely some issues that investors and financiers are looking at. As well as on the output side, there is very often, especially for new business models, a need to have very solid, so to think properly and then to put in place very solid systems where your output is not depending on, let's say, just a single client that could go bust, that could have problems. Also from a technical perspective. So it's important to optimize, diversify your sources and your output. So these are just, let's say, some of the considerations. Again, today we're not going into depth in what are the features in assessing circular economy projects. But just to have everybody on the same page about what, as investors and bankers, we are considered here. That said, today I think I would like to focus a little more and then open the conversation as well to questions, or also to a discussion with other panelists about what I thought would be or could be, because we are talking hypothetics at the moment, I suppose, the impact of the COVID-19 crisis on everything circular economy. In that sense, in the slide number 7, I've put together a couple of, let's say, thoughts that I had that relates to what I've seen so far as being the impact of the crisis on the world of circular economy. So here I would like, well, I just mentioned briefly what's on the page, but really I would encourage you to ask questions or really to start a conversation on this, because for sure some of you have seen some of those issues from first hand, or have other ideas about what really could be a consequence of this crisis, and really what are the opportunities in this for companies in particular, for investors as well. So here, one first consideration that I had was really the amount of single-use disposable healthcare equipment that was used. I was reading that in Alsace-Lorraine, a part of France that was fairly affected by the crisis, one of the most badly hit parts of France for this. Single-use medical equipment use over 2 months went up over 40%. So, and this just in hospitals, so without considering, the private use of gloves or masks and so on. This is a very big number, of course, considering that hospitals very often, for very reasonable background, of course, we don't want to risk infections and so on, but make a big use of this material. So really, one question is what can be done? Technology-wise, I mean, there are other solutions. Yes, I've read about some of that, from X-rays to other techniques to reuse some material, or maybe the material itself could be designed in a way that supports multiple uses, or that can be then recycled and reused elsewhere. So that's one consideration. Food. The food production chain was, in a sense, surprisingly resistant. I think in most of Europe, aside from the first couple of days where supermarket shelves were in some countries made empty, but overall it was quite resistant. So this tells a lot about also the capacity of our, let's say, societies and economic system to be very responsive. And so having a lot of small actors operating together is actually making a system quite resilient, quite robust. On the other hand, in many cases, now the talk is about how to make systems more resilient in case of border closures or absence of seasonal workers. So these are really considerations that all companies working in the sectors have faced, and a rethinking is essential. So now is the right time. Reshoring. I put this point here because I believe, well, with me, a number of economists and policymakers believe that the value chains that very often stretch, over continents for producing, especially car manufacturing is one, but electronics as well, are too long, and not only too long from let's say, an environmental perspective. Of course, there are a number of costs which we are very much aware, being in this call about CO2 production and so on, and also the issue about using too many resources that are then not necessarily reused properly. But also very much from a business security point of view, just because without having access to certain components, the whole of your product cannot be assembled. So this is also a huge operational risk for companies. So I believe we are going to see for sure some rethinking of industrial value chains. In some sector more, cars come to mind, but also there is, I suppose, a political element. So in many countries, I think the discussion of the day is to have an industrial policy, an active industrial policy, and again, I don't want to judge. There are pros and cons in governments having hands-on, I suppose, but here really my point is about what's going to change? What are the opportunities here? So let's make things, let's plan things and new supply chains in a way that they are leaner in terms of materials that is used, in terms of waste that is produced. Another point which I think is very macro, very general about the acceleration of pre-existing trends. I think we are seeing that already. So for instance, the use of platforms such as Zoom or anything IT is really one of those things, but also the fact that basically a deep economic crisis will kill zombie companies. In the wider economy, unfortunately, also hitting very good and efficient companies that just happen to operate in the wrong sectors. Talking about pandemic business, but here definitely there is an opportunity for innovative business models to come up and really take the center stage. Then another more narrow consideration perhaps is home deliveries. I think all of us have probably used or certainly seen a lot more material or even groceries delivered to their home. And with this, a huge amount of packaging being used. Now, there is ongoing attention on this, I suppose, for already a couple of years, but from my personal observation, I see that quite a lot of material is just the polystyrene or styrofoam or just stuff that don't really look very much sustainable. So definitely there is a challenge to this. I think the European Union, it's one of those elements that I found and was quite positively impressed by that. There is quite a lot of policy action which is expected to come and was already before the COVID crisis from that front. So this is really an area where both entrepreneurs and financiers should pay attention. You want to be ahead of the curve. You don't want to have then higher costs than necessary because regulation is putting more costs on you. You also want to have a positive marketing vis-a-vis your customers, your suppliers. You are doing the right thing. So you are able to show that you don't have a lot of things to be ashamed of, also from this, let's say, very much PR point of view. So there's another area, and perhaps another one that came to my mind is public transport. So here, I mean, of course, Commissioner Bulls was very active on that front, and EIB, of course, is one of the biggest financiers worldwide of public transport. But unfortunately, we saw that during the crisis, public transport really is a trade-off vis-a-vis the fact of needing to keep distance between people. So at least for a good couple of months, let's hope for a short periods, I suppose the public transport will not be busy. That means more people will have to find other ways. So what does it mean? Probably a lot of opportunities also for using more sustainable models. So renting equipment such as scooters, electric bicycles, and so on. I mean, this is also a good example of an acceleration of pre-existing trends, but now really there is a huge market which is opening up, probably for a couple of months or years, I don't know. But some of those habits that people will have taken will definitely stay with us. So this is a very good example for companies that maybe are already had already pilot projects in that area to scale up and to really think this is our opportunity. So I would wrap up here, perhaps by coming back to the activities of EIB, who we are and what we do. So as I mentioned, we are financing approximately 60 to 70 billion euros of new lending per year. In particular, for the circular economy, our activities we are aiming in the coming years to lend specifically for strictly defined circular economy projects, something like between 1 and 2 billion per year. What we do, how we operate, is we finance directly fairly large projects. Also because we are a fairly small institution, so we are not a huge bank in that sense, even if the amount that we lend and mobilize indirectly are large. But we also operate quite extensively via intermediary banks. So we have a range of intermediary banks. In Slovenia, for instance, Banka is one, but we operate also providing resources to venture capital funds and private funds that use our resources and our expertise to support small-scale projects. So really my conclusion, and perhaps you may want to take a look at the slides, my last slide, number 8. Take a look on our website. We have a circular economy guide, which gives a lot of examples about projects we have supported, really ranging from pilot schemes from startups to large projects which have big costs but also very large impact. In established sector, in really innovative sectors, take a look there. We have a new guide which was published a couple of days ago. So I suppose you can really find a lot of interesting material there. That said, I would close here my direct intervention, and I very much welcome ideas, thoughts, questions from anybody at home or in the panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Francesco. It was really very insightful, and your slide number 7 is in many ways a great guide to many opportunities and challenges that we are facing in these days. So from those who are, for those ones that are straightforwardly encourage more sustainable and particularly even more circular business models, to those who impose unseen challenges like you demonstrated in the case of the public transportation, where there's a huge need for, let's call it, the redesign of the current ways we move around. There are some questions coming up, and I would like to invite you all to raise hand to ask questions directly. At this point, you may wonder who is Massimo Sbarbaro, right? Because a good part of the participants are registered under Massimo Sbarbaro. I sincerely apologize for this flow. We will correct this by the second part of the seminar. So you can simply ask questions by demuting your mic and briefly presenting yourselves. I will take this first seconds to get back to Francesco with questions that he couldn't read because there were two questions that came in during his speech. The first one is, could you please give us one or two relevant examples of projects where the bank helped with SDG 13 climate action? And the second question, what does it mean just business from personal and business perspective? Then a broader question. I think I would first like Violeta to address it later on. How do you think we can speed up the awareness of investors about circular businesses and also models and systems? How can mindsets be changed and how to have more impact in investors? Francesco, back to you. Maybe through the examples that you can perhaps bring closer one topic that I was thinking through, and it could be very relevant also for the remaining part of the seminar. You are clearly prioritizing issues in your financing policy, clearly prioritizing climate issues and issues related to sustainable development, both particularly those related to the environment. How does this match, and at what stages do you match this with your risk assessment, with your capital requirements? Could you give us a little bit further insight into this, and maybe just demonstrate this on one or two projects, as one of our attendants asked about, please?
Sure, Yuri. Can you hear me?
Yes, please.
Yep. So perhaps going in order, well, starting from your last point about risk management and risk assessment. As EIB, we have professionals which come from the capital markets and banking worlds, applying the best practices and processes of banking in our assessment of credit from a banking point of view. So in that sense, we are operating, assessing the financial strength of a company, of an existing company, perhaps, or for kind of more new innovative companies, we take a slightly different approach. So we really want to see how they are set up, organized, also, but of course also what the capital resources they have at disposal. So essentially, I won't go in details here, but something which is very much the traditional approach of banks. Interesting to say that for a number of years, for a few years, let's say, and it's still work in progress, we have started, and we are actually at the forefront of these, to implement what we call climate risks in our credit assessment, which means assessing the capacity of a certain business to withstand.
That's very interesting. So yes, please.
Yes, it is, and I'm sure that Slaven will have much more on this. We had a conversation last time we spoke on specifically on these points. Again, it would take quite a long topic for perhaps conference in itself, but essentially we are considering from both a business point of view and a financial balance sheet and cash flow perspective, what is the potential impact of, let's say, environmental and climate related risks, be it the fact that a company has got physical facilities set close to the coast in a country which is prone to maybe tsunamis and so on, and these are likely to increase over the years, or perhaps the risk of lawsuits, environmental litigation, and so on. And all of this will essentially is already feeding into our credit assessments, And perhaps the interesting thing is that this is already having, perhaps marginal, but increasingly having for us and for most other institutions, also a pricing impact, which means that more sustainable companies, essentially, will have advantages also in financial conditions. Let's say loans that cost less or have better conditions. This is, let's say there are several working groups put together by the BIS, so the Basel system of regulators, by national central banks and so on, and individually by banks to really start to more and more implement these considerations in how they make credit decisions. So I would stop here, but again, maybe this would be a topic for a separate and different conversation. I don't want to lionize the conversation on this.
Right. It is a topic for an entire conference. Nevertheless, thank you for these clarifications. There's a follow-up question in this area. How do you measure your impact for the projects in circular economy and sustainable ecosystems? What KPIs do you have in place? Do you think this is an important part of the shift? Please, Francesco, back to you.
Sure. It's an extremely important topic, and again, we have made public, so it's on our website. There is a number of documents. So I think one summarized that really goes quickly through the high level, through the KPIs we look at, and we also make available publicly our methodology. It's a much more complex paper, which really, sets out how to measure for certain specific activities the amount of CO2. It's fairly technical, so also in this case I cannot go in depth into answering this question. But maybe two things to answer this. First, we have a number of KPIs which are open to public discussions, which we have discussed not only with other multilateral institutions and financial institutions, but also with NGOs, and let's say the Commission also played a big role in this. So really on how to be sure that impact is monitored. It's not just, let's say, an amount of 10 million or 100 million spent on these, let's say, renewables, but really to be able in an objective and scientific way to prove these cause, let's say, X tons of CO2 to be spared. These, all the various implications. So really for this question, the best thing to do is to check out on our websites. I believe, just Googling EIB, climate KPI, climate methodology, will find plenty of material which goes quite in depth. Perhaps also worth mentioning that as EIB we are leading on two levels, both worldwide with other multilateral financial institutions like the World Bank or Asian Development Bank and so on. Projects on how to measure in an objective manner, so the climate impact, so that these can also be used by the private sector. We see our role also in making easy to understand, user-friendly rules, so that the private sector, let's say capital markets, funds, investors that want and are already actually operating quite a lot in terms of green bonds and so on, use standardized understanding and disclosure of what they're doing to avoid the so-called greenwashing. I think we were all quite aware, especially in the past, and maybe I'm too optimistic, but I think it's something that more and more belongs to the past, that essentially everybody was calling green whatever they were doing. This is less and less going to be the case. Also, on a European level, I was talking about the international level, but on a European level, together with the Commission, actually the Commission is leading this exercise, but the EIB is one of the main participants. We are setting out, the task is, let's say, almost completed, the so-called taxonomy of environmentally and sustainable activities. So really to have a single language and to avoid that basically everybody is using different standards. So the standard setting element, I think, is hugely important here. And as EIB, we are really, working in a transparent manner to set this common language.
Very,
so
very, very important. Very, very good illustration. I think just to add on that, you mentioned on your slides, but maybe it was not underlined sufficiently enough, that one of your ways to exercise impact investing and the imposition of the rules and principles you've just described is by crowding in Slovenia, for example, with SID Banka, the Slovenian Development Bank, and all over Europe, or with many other institutions. And the size of investment, I wouldn't like even to make a comparison with 60 to 70 billion euro of annual financing you provide and the Slovenian Investment Bank, Slovenian Development Bank on the other hand. But to my knowledge, this is some 4 to 5 times more than the French Development Bank, which is a very successful institution. So just to illustrate how important it is to be the market leader, be the market maker for environmental impact investing across the European Union. Violeta would like to raise a hand, and I'm giving the word back to her. And there were other hands that I saw. So please, Violeta first, and then others. Just demute yourself after Violeta and speak out. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I was listening very carefully, and thank you for this deep insights into the EIB, but I'm a politician, so I'm going to be provocative, because I think that European Investment Bank has walked a long way, but it's still behaving too much as a classical bank and not enough as a development bank. And as a development bank, it should be more boldly, and it should more boldly enter the new areas where, of course, the risks are higher, but that's why EU came up with the Juncker's plan called EFSI, and the new so-called InvestEU continues, and it will offer even bigger opportunities to share the risks and go into the areas that are not considered as stable and reliable one yet. However, we need to trust ourselves. And if our vision is to become nature neutral by 2050, and if we already said in all our strategic papers that circular economy is the basic economic model that we are planning to follow, then I would expect a bit more decisive actions, and not just talking about new KPIs that are green, but actually having an open debate and really commit to the KPIs and a renewed process, because everything needs to be reinvented in order to support this new concept, and if you want, eco-civilizational concept, which is even larger than that and goes beyond 2050. So here I would certainly invite the EIB to behave less as a classical bank and more as a development bank, and also work even closer with the EU. We've done we came a long way, I have to admit. I remember year 2014, and now it's a huge difference. But we should continue to expand this cooperation and share the commitments, share the responsibility, but boldly go into this circular economy concepts and green economy. It makes perfect sense from a business point of view as well. EU is still owning more than 45% of all green global patents. So we need to do better in the monetization of them, to bring them on the market. And this is where we're weak. So I would certainly like to invite that we strengthen the roadshows, that we strengthen the advisory board, which is part of the investment plan, and really broaden the capacities, the absorption capacities that people have. Project promoters are not educated well enough, and here the advisory board and roadshows together with the members, with the representations of EU in member states and with the Commission portfolios, we could really make a huge difference. I mean, I'm speaking from the experiences. Transport was never considered to be even interesting for the Juncker's plan. But in 2 years' time, we became one of the most stable portfolios that started to absorb an enormous amount of money. In which areas? In green transport and in digital transport. And these two are walking the path, and new models are being built on a network axis, not on a chain anymore. Value chain is out, value networks are in, so we need to broaden the number of stakeholders that are part of this movement. So as I said, it's a shift in our heads first, which means criteria, the processes, the models, and then the money follows. And I really count on EIB to continue to reinvent itself and to continue to be bold and push promotional banks on a national level, which are really, I mean, worse than the classical banks. They don't give a support to the local project promoters to the point to be really advanced. So here a lot can be done. And just the fact that EIB has to establish offices in member states, you know, tells the story. These should be promotional banks. You should work with them. You should rely on them, but you don't, because they don't do the job. It's a matter of knowledge. I'm not accusing anyone doing it deliberately. It's a matter of knowledge and awareness. And this is where we could play an important role together, even with webinars like this one, with education that the CBA Academy is pursuing, or the university that Karen is representing, and similar ones. So it's a movement. So I mean, I really would like to put as much emotions out as possible. And I know Slaven will talk to you later on, and he can share what's really the inner transformation that the banks are going through, the class ones, catch up with development banks as well. Let's see if they can move faster. Maybe they can take some portfolio away from development banks, and then the development banks will move faster as well. So it's all about helping each other and sharing the risk and sharing the burden. And through the collaboration and discussions, we can lower the failure risk. And it is important that Commission has on the table a report for transport only, but it will be expanded to other areas as well, that shows that transport per year is causing 1 trillion euros of negative externalities. 1 trillion euros, 7% of European GDP goes to negative externalities. So if we only focus on that, and a huge part of that is, of course, pollution.
Yeah. And a lot of that we are tragically seeing right in these weeks and months.
Exactly, and
yes.
Many people are now starting to argue that COVID and the spread of COVID is related to pollution, because it's the biggest spread was really in the most polluted areas. So we need to start seeing our societies and our life and our economies from a fresh perspective. And I have a full confidence. That's why eco-civilization,
Violeta,
good vision.
Violeta, please prepare that slide, but I have to admit I'm having a hard time, because we could go on just by interrogating Francesco and yourself. So now I am calling for the participant who had a question to speak up. So we have a live question from the audience.
Yeah, do you hear me?
Yes, please. Could you please briefly present yourself? And,
I'm Manuel Vedra, calling from Switzerland, working in an investment bank.
Hello, Manuel.
And thanks again for sharing your thoughts and facts. Really interesting until now. And we were talking right now a lot on the EU level, and I was actually raising the question about the KPIs, because I think that's a really important fact to consider. But I think in the research and development of that KPIs, it's really important to work on a global level and actually work with the global organization, not just on the EU level. Because if we just consider the EU level, we are not considering the emerging markets. And there for example, if we develop social KPIs, there are different methodologies have to use in European and development markets than the third-party market. So I think there were a lot of talk about European level, how it's collaboration with the global players, with Bloomberg, MSCI, with the World Bank. How is about that? Is there also a plan to have a standardized global KPIs to follow? Because I think then also the communication and the goals will be really easier to apply and go in one direction if we all follow the same KPIs.
Thank you, Manuel. Violeta, would you like to take this one? And then Francesco and Karin, would you like to? Did you raise a hand?
Well,
okay. Yes.
First, I will be very short because I've talked enough in this first part. All I wanted to say is that EU is one of the most important global players. So if we stand up for something, and if we really start building the global multilateral agreements, we can help to change the world as well. Unfortunately, we lost a big partner. Under most of my mandate, I had a very positive American administration who we shoulder to shoulder were fighting in global institutions to bring the sustainable elements in decision making on a UN level, in different agencies and so on. So we lost this partner, at least temporarily. But that doesn't mean we need to give up, because China is interested in green, because they have too many problems with the pollution. India is interested in green. However, we need to understand that the message that they're sending to us, they said, you were polluting this world while we haven't even had the industry. Now you want us to take all the burden for the pollution by ourselves. So we need to be very innovative in how we manage these global multilateral agreements, and make sure that, of course, we take part of the blame for the pollution that we cause globally. So it's just to be honest and create multilateral partnership on a basis of honest engagements and shared responsibilities. So, but I've seen it. I've done, many projects with Chinese. We put together connectivity platform for new railway connectivity between Europe and China, and they were very much interested. So there was not a problem if you pick up the right topic. And you know that 65% of all transport pollution comes from roads, and almost 70% is from personal cars. So, railway makes a difference. That's why EU is investing 70% of all transport investments in railway capacities. And these are, India is very much pushing for that. There are huge investments going on in India in railway systems, just to lower the pollution and to make sure that they still have a connectivity. So it's going on a global scale as well, but we need to be more sensitive and tune in if we want to lead the multilateral agreements.
So Europe has some weight, right?
Yes.
Yes. Francesco?
Okay, perhaps I'll continue on this very, very interesting question. So saying for sure there is a lot of work to be done, and things are moving perhaps less fast than one would wish. But trying to be quite pragmatic on KPIs and how to measure the impacts of financing, essentially. I would say that in 2015 already there was an agreement, and actually a document, I think it's also quite easy to find online, by development banks internationally. So EIB was, of course, part of the group. With the aim of covering really the KPIs and the monitoring and the calculation of climate impacts of new projects, of activities financed. So this was fairly groundbreaking at the time. The second thing also specifically about common standard and KPIs, again, mentioning EIB, we were the first institution to issue so-called green bonds, which have now created a market which has boomed already and continues to to be booming, where now the issuers are national governments, private companies, and so on. And they're also talking about a non-EU scale. So EIB, most of the bonds issued on the capital markets are actually bought by international investors, not necessarily EU investors. I would also like to say that EIB standards for green bond, the first one that we issued was in 2007, were subsequently taken as a basis and then made the international standard by the ICMA, which is International Capital Market Association. So essentially, the skeleton was created in Europe, but then actually went out, and now I would say that the criteria that are also used by the private market for defining green bonds are fairly solid. I mean, of course, we are still seeing on the markets and in the public media, let's say, a reflection of what's less than perfect maybe happened 3, 5, 10 years ago. But more and more, I would say that also the capital market has got common standards and KPI and a way of substantiates their claims, which is international and not just at EU level.
Thank you. Karin, a remark from your side?
Just very briefly from my side. Thank you for this very relevant question. One of the problems we have in measuring impact is the paradigms under which we measure. Because we measure quantitative data, we measure how much, and we do not measure so far why and what. And this is something that we will have to take a look at on how to measure this best, and how to report on it, and how to develop key performance indicators that are actually key impact indicators, because it's not about how much we put into something, and therefore we don't have the right measures yet to really make this relevant and comparable. And this is what we have to work on. Just
Thank you.
Very briefly.
Thank you. Is there another question from the audience? If there is one, please spare it for later. We will have some more time for questions later on. We will move to the next speaker right now. I really thank to Manuel for speaking up. I thank gratefully to Violeta and Francesco for their excellent contributions. And I am pleased to announce the next speaker on today's agenda, who I think will also deliver some more insights on the issue that Karin just raised, what we are actually measuring. Slaven Vičković is an experienced risk manager in Abanka, a researcher, advisor to not only in the banking sector itself, but also in the public finance sector. And he will address the difficulties companies meet when they approach banks with ambitious, sustainable or circular business proposals. And he will also give you the whys and also some advice about how to go about it and get closer to better understanding between the two sides. Slaven, please, the word is yours.
Many thanks, Yuri. And also hello from my side to all the participants and the speakers.
And please take over the screen as well. You just press the green button, share screen, and you're there.
Do we have now my screen?
Yes.
Okay, I will increase it. Is it
Great.
okay now?
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. So I will repeat myself and say hello again to everybody. First of all, I would like to say that I was very pleased with Violeta's introduction, and definitely the part of her energy energy touched me, and I believe that I'm not the only one yet. Short introduction. Yes, indeed, I work for last 6 years in A Banca, whole time in risk department, and currently I'm responsible for stress testing for macroeconomic scenarios and so on. As you mentioned before that, I work for more than a decade in Ministry of Finance and very responsible for introduction of all these, let's say, common EU methodologies in analysis of Slovenian budget. But let's jump to our topic. So how to communicate with the banks. My objective is that in next 10 minutes, give you a few recommendations in order to ease that communication. And yes, implicitly, I believe that all of us agree that benefits of circular economy are increasingly recognized. But then comes but here. But obviously, there are some barriers in that. Many of them we can classify that barriers in cultural, technological, regulatory barriers, and indeed there are also, let's say, if I may say so, financial barriers. Definitely, our rating methodologies and models are not adequate. We also have inadequate financial schemes. So really we have some problems, and as Violeta stressed several times, although the path we went is long, it seems that we are at the beginning yet. Let me start with the imaginary example. Let's imagine that you want to move toward a circular model. Let's imagine that you have a product with minimal harm to environment and to society. So you focus, or the model, the product is built from fair materials, if I may. So the design of the product is long-lasting, and of course, you assume recycling. Huge percent of the product can be recycled, and on the top of everything, you have a good working conditions. So obviously you want to move or the concept of value from product to, let's say, service of the what product offers. If we quickly analyze that the bankability of the project of introduction of that product is based on new technology. We have only statements. Oh, I forgot to say, let's imagine that you are a very young company. So let's say year or two. So we have only 1 year financial statements, profit and loss statement, and balance sheet. The technology, or let's say demand for this type of service is unknown to the bank. We already stressed that we have a minimal harm to society and environment. And what is important for the bank is cash flow, and usually the circular business project have, at least at the beginning, negative cash flow, and only after, I don't know, 1 year or 2 years, we have a positive cash flow. So the question is, do we have advantage over a classical linear project? And I'm sure that most of you believe or know that answer, unfortunately, is no. We do not have advantage. Why is that so? So if we want to ease our communication, we have to know what bank wants to know from us, what bank is interesting about. And the first thing is we have to understand what are the existing practice of the bank. I think that the key answer, or the reason why our, let's say, circular projects currently do not have advantage over the linear lies in current practice of the banks. So let's say that you are a new client. What are bank going to ask you about, or what are the major factors banks take into account? The first one is creditworthiness of your creditworthiness, and secondly, it is the value of collateral you are offering to the bank. So, in order to assess your creditworthiness, the bank will analyze your balance sheet, your profit and loss statement. All these aspects comes to the, let's say, quantitative bracket. Many indicators for liquidity, profitability, and so on, bank will analyze and come to some conclusion. The bank will usually put you in one of the 5 or 10 brackets, that usually use letters A, B, C, D, meaning with starting A, highest quality, and the letter D or E comes for the lowest quality. Of course, the bank also have some qualitative indicators. Unfortunately, if you are a new company, there are no too many these qualitative indicators like experience or the quality of the management board, experience with the client. So are you late in your obligations and so on. So the next question is, what's wrong with that picture? Why all this is not enough that we have some advantage? At least that we are in the equal position with the usually linear projects banks financing. So we can jump. I will start with my presentation. The fact is that the bank currently cannot identify the risk which remains in linear projects. Simply, what this linear project do to environment or some tax, regulatory, or climate things involved in linear projects cannot be measured simply looking at the balance sheet or profit and loss statement. There are nothing about circularity in these financial statements. And not only that, the existing rating models cannot capture some really specific profile of circular projects. So what is good, let's say, in circular projects is not measured, and what is bad in linear project is also not measured. I can jump to the next. Just looking at the financial statements, there is nothing about externalities. And all of us know that the linear model, the linear economy produce a lot of externalities. I think that Violeta also mentioned how many percentages from EU budget comes just because of pollution of our environment. And finally, speaking about regulatory things, the Basel agreement, which is, let's say, the top document banks considering when analyzing the risks, simply just marginally addressed this, let's say, shift towards circularity from existing linear models. I can go even further on that I can say that Basel agreement can be adverse to the circular financing. So what we can do about that? In such environment, when banks cannot measure our advantages and even regulatory documents barely mention positive things about circularity, what we can do? Well, it's definitely not of the game, and there are a lot of things we can do. First of all, I believe that if I return to the imaginary example, if bank is interested in cash flow, then you have really, your first task is to produce a reliable model of cash flow. So you will define realistic scenario about the use of the service you are providing, and estimate the fee you can charge for your services, and then produce a really reliable cash flow. You can also, how to say, think about what are the collateral, how you will intend to how to say, give guarantees to the bank for possible financing. Yeah. So what you can emphasize, probably the quality of your clients. In that terms, the possible contract, I think Francesco mentioned that in listing the risks, the contract you may offer to your clients could be very, very important for the bank to understand. You can also address the asset quality you are offering to the bank. So really, that bank have something in the hand as a collateral. So overall, you can, let's say, emphasize all the things coming from your shift from linear to risk model. And I think that at this stage, it's not only on you, and I believe that it's not only you who have to adapt to a new environment. I strongly believe that also the banks have the task in this, let's say, movement from linear to risk. Somebody before me said that we have to share the things, and all of us are in this game. So there are very important part on the bank side. So my recommendation, what I want to say, my recommendation also comes to the bank side. So every time the bank gives the loan, or provide a loan to somebody, also reserves the part of the capital for that loan. Meaning the capital adequacy currently is the top priority for all the banks. So what I want to say, in other words, is we have to integrate the capital requirements in circular related risk. Currently, we are not doing that, and the way how we can do that, now I'm referring to the green documents of the previous EU Commission. They proposed two things, two indicators how to integrate these risks into the capital adequacy. There are two possible indicators or factors we can introduce. The first one is circular supporting factors, and the second one is the linear penalizing factor. In practice, it means that every bank has to split the portfolio in two parts. One part is connected with the so-called linear projects, and another one is connected with new circular projects. So the capital, the circular supporting factor will reduce required capital for these projects, for the circular projects, and oppositely, the linear penalizing factor will increase the required capital for the linear projects. In such a way, let's say, the bank can give some advantage to the circular projects. And as far as I know, I believe that this project is highly ranked on the priorities of the current EU Commission. And I believe in the next 12 months, we will see the new regulation which will favorize or give some advantage to movement to the, let's say, sustainable financing, and in line with that to the circular projects. Yeah. Of course, this is not the only one recommendation. I can list some of them are listed in the last slide. I believe that, sorry, my battery is out. Okay. First of all, I believe that circularity or sustainable financing has to be part of bank strategy. At the beginning, I mentioned that current rating methodology is not enough good, or I may say, not penalizing or not give advantage to the companies which wants to move to the circular model. So yes, we have to upgrade our current risk methodology, our current rating methodologies. There are probably a number of them, but I believe for the beginning that is enough from my side. I'm open to your possible questions, and Yuri, that's for now all from my side.
Very well, thank you very much, Slaven. Could you please share with us the slide that was there for a very, very short time, the circular and linear risks, because I think we'll need this. Yeah.
Yes, Yuri, I deliberately didn't go into details with this. I believe that most of our participants already know or see that table, but of course there is a need.
I would just like to make a short comment here. You basically, you are saying that on one side circular risks are overly exposed in current risk assessment, and linear risks are largely omitted. And this is the Basel Constitution for banks that actually is the starting point. And even though Francesco gave us, I think, a very good insight into how things are changing, this is the gap that is being created. And if we want, I think there's one thing more to take over into the next stage of this seminar. Violeta said value chains are out, value networks are in. I mean, when we look at both linear and circular risks, our understanding in terms of circularity increases if we analyze them along value chains. But when these value chains become value networks, of course, we have to take a broader stakeholder view. So with these thoughts, I would like to ask the participants to carry this over to the part one, and also when they will also to the lunch break, when they will be invited to fill in the circularity assessment score. Apologies. So there is a comment for you, Slaven. saying that, of course, a situation like that is not limited only to Slovenia or Europe. In the opinion of our participants, well, what is your opinion? When are the banks going to be more open to support smaller entrepreneurs to develop, for example, off-grid energy solutions? Is there a clue about that you would like to briefly reply right now?
Sorry, you asked me. I don't see the question.
I'm going to read it once more. In your opinion, when will the banks going to be more open to support smaller entrepreneurs to develop, for example, off-grid energy solutions? Can we expect banks to systemically change? I mean, EIB is working a great deal towards that, but do you expect a very different typology of commercial banks down the road? Are you an optimist? Let's put it like that.
Definitely. I think that as speakers before me said, the EU is leading in that area, and this comes also to the banks. So the banking regulation will be definitely changed. As all other things, I believe that this current situation a little bit, how to say, stopped. No, stop is not the right word. Just prolong
the process. Yes.
This process. But from the information coming from Association of Slovenian Banks, I believe that it may happen in the autumn time.
Okay, very well.
Probably next year, banks will have to change their rating systems, their rating methodologies, and then the assessment of circular projects can be really the real one, and all the advantages coming from that projects will be adequately measured.
So we need to understand the starting point also, because things are changing and are going to change relatively fast in the near future.
Yuri, I'm just speaking for EU banking system.
Yeah, of course. Thank you very much. I am a little bit worried about time. I hope you are still doing okay, and you have sufficient energy left. There is our next speaker that I would like to briefly introduce. Karin Kuber-Heim is one of the leading Austrian, and not only Austrian, experts on sustainability. As the program director at the University of Applied Sciences in Vienna, focusing on sustainability and responsible management. She has a significant insight into the practices of the banking sector, and not only. When we were preparing this seminar, I asked her to go a little bit deeper into the decision making at different levels, and what are the different roles that stretch from the supervisory boards or executive boards to middle management, to experts and other participants in this circular transformation. Karin, could you please take the word and take over the screen as well? Thank you.
Thank you. I will take over now and share. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. Yes, so a warm welcome to all the participants also from my side here in Vienna. Thank you, Yuri, for making me part of this excellent panel and this wonderful discussion that we've been having so far. Let me contribute now with the perspective of the corporates. And when I talk about corporates, I also include banks actually here. Because what I also do next to my academic activities, I support and advise organizations on how to implement sustainability at the core of their business strategically, and how to align their business strategies with the Sustainable Development Goals, the global goals of the United Nations. This is why post-COVID, and we've had an ongoing discussion in the chat already, which I very much favored. Post-COVID, the future is already there. So we have been taking care, and many of us are still taking care, and the crisis is not over, of the immediate response issues that we have to take care of. But still, there are many other issues due to our unsustainable behavior on this planet in the past some 40, 50 years that will not go away by us just sitting at home or taking our bicycles rather than taking our cars. So this is a long-term systemic perspective that we need to have here, and that we need to apply. And this refers to each of us, from politics, authorities, municipalities, down to citizens, consumers. But of course, it refers also to research or academics, and also to businesses, because business actually is at the core of society, and business has always been and will always be the driver for innovation, for innovation that serves society. This has been gone lost actually in the past decades of globalization and of neoliberalism in our economic system, which is a shame, because this is what actually entrepreneurship is meant to be, and that this is what markets have been made for, to serve the people. And when we now talk about post-COVID activities, I really want to put your attention now to how can business be a part, or take their very important role to provide growth that gives back more than it takes. There are the already mentioned UN Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, or global goals, that provide tremendous business opportunities up to 2030, and of course beyond. It's only 10 more years to go, so this is really a challenge, and we do not have all the solutions yet. And when several players or decision makers from business to society to politics scream for where are the solutions, well, we have to collectively develop them. We have to join up, form interdisciplinary, cross-sectoral collaboration and cooperation to find those solutions. But we can, because right now, globally, even though this may not refer to each and everyone, but globally, we are the richest, the most healthiest, the best technically equipped society that this planet has ever hosted. So bearing this in mind, we should really not fall back onto old habits or behavior that brought us into this crisis that we are trying to deal with now, which costs us an enormous amount of money, as does the climate crisis that we have been causing. So really, instead of looking backwards and trying to bring historic things that do not work into a future where they do not apply anymore, we should really look into the future and see this future as a collectively agreed upon one that is good for people, for the planet, and for business. The European Green Deal is the operationalization, I'm sorry, I'm not getting out this word. It operationalizes what the vision of the goals is, and brings it down to the European market and the European citizens. And it also bears sustainable investments in an enormous amount. But yet, many companies are still stuck in the past. In the next decade, they can either adapt and thrive, or like the dinosaurs that have been very, very big creatures on this planet, and still they died. So no one is too big to fail for the future. And this change that we're looking for and that we need must come from the top. And this is something that is very worth looking into for business. And businesses already do around the globe, because they see the opportunities in several systems where they can provide solutions, develop technology that is applicable or innovative to provide humanity and to provide people with what they need, rather than what they may not need and what will cause just more trouble. So to align with this vision of a world that is more sustainable, more just, more healthy, greener than the one that we have been creating over the past 50 years, bears numerous opportunities for businesses that are very, very worth looking into. To future-proof a business these days means to put sustainability and technology at the core of the business, because only this way we can drive sustainable change. So businesses, corporations, whether it's banks or other financial institutions, to privately owned businesses or capital market-oriented businesses, SMEs, startups, have to reconsider what they ask themselves when they enter a market. It's no longer, are our products and business models profitable? The profitability is the core, otherwise you wouldn't be a business, or you would not be, you should not call yourself a business. So yes, profitability is key, but it should not be the very, very first and single bottom line that you ask yourself. You should rather ask yourself, are our products and business models future-proof? And this is a much harder scrutinizing your business model and the products and the services you currently sell, because not many of them qualify for the world that we want to live in. Of course, this when I talk about sustainability, I always bear circularity in mind, because circularity, a circular business model, a circular economy, is the only plan that we have currently to be able to deliver growth or to reach growth within our planetary boundaries. And therefore, circular economy is at the heart of sustainability, and it needs to be at the heart and minds and the awareness of businesses as well. So when we talk about a new business excellence that is needed for the future, I put together a couple of elements that are extremely important, and that each business, no matter in what sector or how big it is, should really put at the very top of the agenda. First of all, it's the knowledge and the analysis of social and environmental impacts, positively and negatively, along the entire value chain. We need to know the full life cycle of products, including the material sourcing, the production, the consumption, the disposal and recycling processes. And we need to be completely aware of stakeholders' expectations and concerns in all those stages. What we currently do not have is in applied business, but I can also say this from the point of view of teaching in business schools. I teach a lot in business schools, and students to this day do not get taught instruments that apply to this kind of business perspective. They still get taught the Porter value chain, which you all who are in business will be very much aware of. The Porter value chain was efficient and did apply in the 80s, 90s, maybe even the millennium. But it does not apply any longer. And it's really disturbing to see the Porter value chain still being so highly used and being even taught to students who will be the future decision makers and the leaders who have to take care of those challenges and issues that we're facing. Because this is almost like you want to repair a computer with a hammer. This is a tool that does not apply for the future. So this is really, these are really things that need to be integrated deeply already in when we educate business leaders. So this is one of the most important elements. Of course, we need this vision. We need to be aligned. We need to all go into the same direction. We have those 169 targets below the 17 goals. We have 233 indicators on how states can measure progress. If companies, corporations, businesses look into them, they will see what is needed from them and for them to contribute to this kind of a future. So a very important element for business is to understand the systemic and transformational nature of the SDGs. Systemic means that I cannot pick and choose, first of all, and secondly, if I target one goal, or if I choose targets from below the goals where I can contribute, this means my contribution on a corporate level, but also on a state level, may cause a spillover positively, but also negatively on other sectors in my industry, on other industry, on people, or even on other states, if this is on a state level. So therefore, it is very important to know the interdependencies and the systemic character of contributions to the goals and contributions to a better future. And the second part is, this is a paradigm shift in the mindset of economic players who so far always have been taught and have applied the what's in for me thinking. This has even stretched to society and to consumers and who have been brainwashed by marketing in the past 50 years to only think what's in for me when they think about something. This is actually not a deeply human thought, because humans are social animals, and this is how we thrived from being from the Stone Age to now. We collectively, we joined up and we came together in groups and we hunted together. So this is really something that we need to bear in mind. This mindset of what's in for me and where is my personal gain, my personal profit, my corporate profit, my where am I in this, is relevant, but it should not be the very first question to ask, and it should not be the very first answer to be given. And the paradigm shift in the Sustainable Development Goals is that we have to come to a different mindset that is asking, how can I contribute? So if corporations look into the goals and into the targets, this is not a checkbox exercise where they can say, oh, I'm doing this and this and this. I'm taking care of good health for my employees. I foster quality education and gender equality, and whatever, I do some energy efficiency measurements, check, I'm contributing to the goals. This is not enough, because where we are currently is not enough. This is why we have the goals, and this is why we need to move. So they should rather look into, where do I need to contribute? Where can I, as a corporation, with my knowledge, my technology, as an investor with my money, as a community with our shared goals and visions, how can we contribute? And where do we need to contribute to make this happen and to make the world this kind of a place by 2030 and beyond? So this is really, this really needs a different mindset that is by far not common in business, and unfortunately not with many people. Number three, a very important element for business excellence is the setting of measurable targets. And we have already had this discussion of the KPIs and the key impact indicators that need to be redesigned. There are several approaches, and I'm sure we can make this. We are intelligent. We are the most intelligent race on this planet. It should be easy to come up with relevant indicators. I mean, this really should be an easy task. We just need to get up and go and really make this happen. I know we don't have them yet, but we will have them, I'm sure. I'm very positive. Number four, I would definitely say that corporate reporting for corporations is a very important element, because it is a strategic management tool. It gives corporations insights into their entire value chain, risk insights on how to manage those risks, how to mitigate them, how to proactively tackle them, and how to turn them into an opportunity rather than have them on the risk side. Which brings enormous achievements in how you can develop or develop as a corporation, how you can develop innovative new products or solutions, how you can move forward towards a better future for your business and create a value for everyone who's involved. So delivering information on how sustainability targets and goals are achieved is key. You need to be clear of what they are and what kind of a value you create by reaching them or achieving them, not only for your business, but also for society and planet. This is one of the hardest parts, or is proving to be one of the hardest parts so far. Those so-called ESG criteria, the economic, environmental, and social issues that corporations' activities and decisions are causing, or that they are part of. This is for the most of them, and actually there is a new study out. It's 78 of Europe's largest companies fail in adequately reporting on environmental and climate related risks, despite the EU guidelines that are given. So the so-called materiality, the most relevant for stakeholders to report, is not well covered. The question is, to me, I can see, of course, the companies that I work with are looking for support in doing this, because this is what I support them with and what many of my colleagues and my teams are supporting people with, corporates with, because they do not know better, because as I mentioned before, they work with insufficient tools that do not give them provide them this full perspective, and therefore it will never become really material. And others, of course, are misusing reporting for marketing reasons, or attracting investors, or putting a veil on their not so green activities. So there is definitely room to improve. One element to really improve this and to show that you are serious as a corporation or a financial institution is to formalize sustainability in board charters and governance, as well as in policies for operations. This is a key tool to really achieve true corporate sustainability and to really achieve true contributions to a different economy. There needs to be guidance on how or what sustainable innovation is, and there need to be clarity on circular business models and their opportunities and chances. So a well-structured sustainability committee serves this with steering sustainability right to the heart of the company, bringing in circular business model innovation into the company's strategy, and really provide a good start into a sustainability journey for a company. The sustainability committee or the board could be whatever applies to a company, could really be the driving, or can really be the driving force of innovative sustainability in a company, whether it's a non-executive board or an advisory council with external experts, or an internal board at executive level. Just make sure that you have the right people in there who really are experts, and not just have friends sitting in there, because this is something that I can tell you happens in Austria very often. So the result needs to be a total integration of sustainable business practices into the company. So this should not be a separate committee that just pops up here and there. It should be integrated and really be part of the game. Very large corporations around the globe are already using the board steering, sustainability boards, sustainability experts in boards to ensure a robust overview and long-term value creation. Here are 10 tips that I put together for boards. From defining long-term value as a priority, to board charters, integrated board agendas, have a senior member of the organization chair the board, both in terms of the business experience and the sustainability experience, because remember, it's about the sustainability of business. It's not about sustainability here and business on the other side. This needs to be thought together, brought together, and acted upon together. And if you see this not as a separate or standalone agenda point, this will immediately go into be presented in the reporting as well, because a sustainability report is a nice thing, but if it is not matched and integrated with the business data and with the business performance and the business strategy, it does not make any sense. Because it will never do what it could do. So the incorporation into the strategy and the annual targets, not so much the quarterly ones, but the annual ones, in the reporting is very relevant and to materialize, meaning really pick the most important ones and make objectives and targets so that the board is able to oversee the progress as well, not just the external, but of course also ultimately the external stakeholders that you want to inform. Include the good and the bad, because not everything is good. This is a fact. We are not where we would like to be, and just putting out the good stuff. You have a marketing department for this. Corporates have PR departments. You can make a great image campaign, but this has nothing to do with corporate reporting on creating value for society. And definitely when something has worked, it's important to analyze why it has worked. And the same, of course, refers to if it has not worked. So again, here we need to look into the KPIs or the measurements that we put on it, because just by measuring quantities or financial outcomes, we will not see the full picture. And there is nothing wrong with measuring this and providing information on it, but the perspective needs to be widened. And this refers also to the risk angle and the opportunity angle. So this really needs to be widened. And last but not least, I think Violetta has mentioned it, education is key. It's not only key for students who will be the leaders of tomorrow. It also refers to the ones that we already have in corporations and companies, to all the decision makers, and it also, of course, refers to board members. They need education, and there's nothing wrong with it, because education is something that will accompany us for the rest of our lives, and it makes our lives more colorful and more interesting than sticking with the same old stuff that we've always done, always applied, and always known. So I am a strong advocate for constant education and knowledge creation. So thank you. This was it from my side. I have kept you from lunch for quite some time now, and please take this with you into the lunch break. This is Franz Timmermans, who has said that in regard to the COVID crisis, and all the voices that have been coming up on taking the Green Deal down, because there is no time to take care of this now. The Green Deal actually is not a luxury. We really need this to come out better from this crisis than the way we went into it. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Karin. Indeed, very insightful. I regret that we cannot take more minutes for a debate, because you raised so many good questions, and it's really like a manual for corporates. Really an important contribution. I think also that there was a question that raised the half time of your speech. In brief, how do you convince a CEO who sees sustainable development as a buzzword to get closer and start considering SDGs to its business? So I think in the last slide you gave hands-on replies to that, and I would say start from the board. That would help already, and then education, because all this is not just about changing some tactics. It's really about getting the understanding in the inside of us, just as Violetta started this day. I think we have had a very intensive morning, and it's 1 o'clock, and I think everybody deserves lunch right now. So I will allow myself to take only 60 more seconds to you to prepare you for the rest of the day, and that will be here. very simple. Please fill in your circularity assessment score. It is a very practical tool that can help you communicate with investors, communicate with banks, communicate with boards, and above all, understand yourselves and your business model. And how do you do that? You go to this website, www.circularbusiness.academy. You find the window titled Circularity Assessment Score. Everybody can do it. And then read the instructions and click here on the green button to start compiling the questionnaire. It will not take a long time. This is the quick version of the Circularity Assessment Score. When you will have submitted it, our team will work it out and will send you back the report. So with this report, you will be able to attend the second half and receive some feedback to it. The last thing to say is apologies again for not being able to expose your names. If you are okay with Massimo Barbaro, who is our dear team member and our IT manager and partner, if you're okay with that, you can stay tuned in. This room will stay open through lunch. If you would like to reapply at 15:30, then please follow the link that we will send you once more during the lunch break, and yeah, you will then attend the second part of the seminar with your name tag. Thank you for your attention. This was a very good meeting indeed. I thank to Violeta, to Karin, to Slaven, and of course to Francesco Ferrero, who we cannot see, but who's been as well extremely helpful during this day. And I'm looking forward to seeing you in shortly after the lunch break. Bye-bye.
Bye.